So you gotta love good old Jordan B. Peterson. He has said a lot of wise things, and in the past, and he still does. Every now and then he'll say something, and I'm just like, man, that's completely out of left field, and it sounds retarded. But got a lot of respect for the man. And there's this interview that just took place. Let's see what he says.
Psychologist and author of We Who Wrestle with God, Dr. Jordan Peterson joins me now. Dr. Peterson, we love this book. We love all of
We Who Wrestle with God. I didn't know he had a new book out.
Your books.
I don't think the dude's a Christian, to be honest with you. From everything I've heard, he's a good man, and he's a very deep thinker, but I don't think he's actually born again.
This one, little meatier than some of the ones I've been reading recently, but
you don't read books.
This cultural shift in this country throughout the world. People are struggling to find out, is it their identity, their mission, their meaning in life? What are you observing right now?
Well, I think you can attribute the fact of the culture war that's occurring everywhere in the West, very intensely in the United States, but also throughout Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, to a confusion about the nature of the story that should orient us in the world. And the academics, the postmodern types, have put forward really the notion that life is about hedonistic pleasure or about power. And the problem with that is that both those stories are self-defeating. You don't want to be around anybody who's primarily motivated by power. And you don't want
or hedonism and self-indulgences either. I'm with you so far. So far, he's making sense. I have to pay attention really difficult, because I'm not, I'm just a civil man.
to be around anyone who's primarily motivated by their own pleasure-seeking self-interest. You need a different pattern of orientation in the world to make you desirable.
A higher purpose.
Make you able to have functional relationships.
Like God, maybe?
In order to stabilize the future and to give your life meaning. And for better or worse, the story that the free countries of the world are founded on are the stories of the biblical library. And so we now know enough, I think, about human psychology to make a case for the validity of those stories in a manner that's compelling and also scientifically credible. And I've tried to do that in this book.
There's a lot of people out there.
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't believe in God, you cannot doubt that Western civilization built on the morals and just like the good teachings in Christianity has just laid such a good, solid foundation for this kind of experiment where we have become this extraordinarily diverse country with all of these different beliefs, and yet it is founded upon, a lot of very strong moral values that come out of Christianity. So even if you don't believe in God, it's just kind of like, man, we really do need something to ground us, and just following cultural trends or your own pleasures and satisfactions, or power and control and money and wealth, get that money, like if your life gravitates around that stuff, it's kind of like building it on quicksand,
They're not very attached to the Bible or to the Christian faith. Why is it so important to go back all of these years and listen to these stories? Why is it important for people to do that now, especially?
That's a good question.
It does appear to be the case that we see the world through a story. I would say that there's converging evidence from multiple lines of scientific inquiry that that's the case. In fact, a description of the structure through which
So we see the world through a story, according to scientific inquiries.
we see the world is a story. The next question then is, in the face of widespread confusion about identity, that's what identity politics is. It's confusion about the story that orients us in the world. We have to look somewhere to ground ourselves, and the age-old historical traditions of mankind are the orientation poles that have guided us forever, and there's no reason to assume that we've superseded that any more than we've actually superseded the necessity for stories. Everyone wants a great movie, a great novel. They want to be able to tell a great story about their own life. Like, the story is integral to being human, and there's a pattern of story that we need to know, and those patterns are encapsulated in our traditions.
So, from what I'm following and trying to follow him, because again, big words, So throughout all of human history, we've understood things through stories. Stories are powerful. Tell them around the campfire and all that kind of stuff. And everyone these days are struggling with identity politics. Who am I? What am I? What gender am I? What dumb pronouns do I use? Yada, yada, yada. And he's suggesting that in order to find that answer is we look within stories, and these stories go back years and years and years, and there's no reason to think that we're somehow super sophisticated enough, which honestly, the writing is on the wall. Obviously, we're not. We have all this technology, and yet we're more lost than ever. So we should probably go back to some of the roots of civilization, because if you just look outside your door, people are like going cuckoo. If you just look on TikTok, TikTok for sure. I don't go on TikTok a lot, but Twitter, and you see even just some of like the reactions to the election, people are lost, man.
Getting away from that and still being human. We can deviate from it and degenerate into pathology, meaninglessness, but there's no getting away from the story.
Yeah.
The question is, what's the right story?
Or who's the author? Maybe that's the
Cain
question.
and Abel, you talk about Adam and Eve in here. What locks people into meaning? Many people
God.
in America right now, their life has no meaning. It's just pleasure, watching TV, eating. Why is the desire for meaning so important, and how do you arrive there?
Well, another great question. If I was sitting in Jordan Peterson's shoes, I'd be like, well, Mr. What's this guy's name? I forget his name. I'd be like, well, Mr. So-and-so, that's a great question. In order to find it out, you should buy my book. I would use it to shill it.
Well, there's two ways of thinking about that.
He's essentially asking, what's the meaning of life?
We're arranged biologically and spiritually so that we find the deepest meaning in acting out the patterns that are most productive psychologically, socially, and in the long run. That's different than happiness. That's more akin to the sense of purpose and accomplishment that might flood over you, let's say, if you accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. That's a marker from the deepest recesses of your soul that you're on a path that's going to unite you with other people. It's going to stabilize you psychologically. It's going to make you a blessing to yourself. That's the terminology from the story of Abraham. It'll help you establish something of long-term permanent significance. It'll make you a good father. It'll make you a good mother, a good husband, a good citizen, the sort of person that people want to be around voluntarily.
Sounds like a lot of mumbly jumbly big words. You kind of lost me now. When what's his name asked him, like, so how do people find meaning? He should have just responded, well, it's Jesus, I'm afraid. That's the only word he should have said. Yeah, it's Jesus. And then just sat there and just looked at him. Like, that would have solved it. You don't need to add all this.
With meaning, and that's associated in turn with, well, you might say,
and I tell you, most people have probably tuned out.
Voluntary responsible conduct.
I love Jordan Peterson.
And that's the right basis for psychological stability and for community. It's not arbitrary. There's a pattern to it.
And you need to have...
I saw this comedian the other day who was a fan of Jordan Peterson make fun of him. Jordan Peterson will use his hands like this, and the comedian was like, he was impersonating him, and he was like, I just talk like I'm stretching out bubble gum all the time. If you ever look at Jordan Peterson talk, it looks like he's stretching out bubble gum. Makes me sound smarter.
Personal responsibility, personal accountability, and a little sacrifice. That's been missing in a lot of places these days.
Well, we haven't told a story of responsibility, really, especially to young people, not effectively for
not recently.
Generations. And the consequence of that is a crisis of meaning. And it's so strange that the antidote to meaning of a crisis of meaning is, in fact, voluntary responsibility. And people know this because
or involuntary responsibility when it comes to children. One of the easiest and most practical ways you could fix this is just take children, young adults, teenagers, out of school, out of that worthless prison, and put them to work. Make them work. Teach them discipline and self-responsibility.
One of the things that, what would you say,
what are you looking
is
at?
a great benefit to everyone is to understand that your efforts have been well received by the people that you're serving. That's something that you can comfort yourself on many a long and dark night.
Yeah, being a good servant.
Being of some genuine utility to other people, people you love, maybe even people that are your enemies. You know, if you
love your enemies,
conduct yourself at the highest possible level of virtue. And there's a very tight relationship between the voluntary acceptance of high levels of responsibility and the meaning that sustains you even when you're suffering. That's a wonderful thing to know. Why work hard? Why be of service to other people? Because it imbues your life with the significance that enables you to tolerate the difficulties of your existence and without bitterness and with hope.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, basically it's kind of this circular argument. Like if you put in this good moral work, then you're going to receive from it. You know, if you're a good servant to others, if you forgive your enemies, if you follow the lessons of the Bible, it's going to have this circular effect, like karma kind of, and it's going to have this incredibly positive impact on your life in a very practical and natural worldly sense. Yeah, that's true. He's not wrong. Christians would argue that it also has an eternal kind of ripple, like it ripples out into eternity as well, which also gives great meaning to yourself because you realize this suffering, yes, being a good Christian or you know, a moral person will reflect very well on my life. However, if I go through struggles and tribulations, it also is like sowing seeds out into eternity. So he's kind of leaving out that aspect and only looking at the kind of this reality, this side of eternity itself.
Associated with meaning. The stories of the Bible, they're about you. Whether you know.
No, they're not. No, they're not. No, I gotta disagree with you there. The stories of the Bible are all about Jesus, okay? Let's not get that twisted.
Obviously, who else would they be about?
Jesus.
What's the story?
Jordan, this is why I say he's such a smart guy. He's such a smart and intelligent guy, but he's missing the one most important thing.
And we're going to get back to those
They're about
stories.
God, man.
We Who Wrestle with God, Dr. Jordan Peterson, thank you so much.
I might have to check that book out. We Who Wrestle with God. That's the end of the video. I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson. I think that, I don't know, I followed him. And then he was talking about, you know, clean your room. But then he kind of got off the deep end and he got like addicted to drugs. I shouldn't laugh. It's technically true. It was a prescribed drug, but it really messed him up and he got in like the hospital and it kind of wrecked him really bad. So he was out of commission for several years. And then he started to get back into the circuit and he joined the Daily Wire, and you don't see or hear about him a lot. And ever since then, every now and then he'll have these really strange kind of views. Some of them are still very solid. Most of them are still very solid. But then every now and then he'll come out with something and say something really weird and it's like, what? Where did you get that? Still a big fan. And I watched him on Kill Tony a while back. He was on there pretty recently. And so, yeah, interesting stuff. It's always good to hear from Jordan Peterson. You know, dust off the cobwebs in that brain, you know, just kind of, you know, unclog some of the gears. It's like, oh man, I need to really pay attention, you know? It actually like, wow, this is a conversation I have to think. I'm not used to that. Anywho, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, guys.